Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This lecture we're going to look at policy conflicts and it is an exam essential. So let's go through and have a look. We've covered off what IAM policies are, what S3 bucket policies are, and what S3 ACLs are. And what we want to understand is what happens if an IAM policy conflicts with an S3 policy, which conflicts with an S3 ACL. And this is a huge exam topic, and I really do mean that. This would probably be worth around 10 marks in your exam, depending on what random questions you get assigned. So understanding this inside out is critical to passing your exam. I use the example of with any of the associates, you need to understand VPCs inside out. With the security specialty, one of the key things you need to understand is policy conflicts and how to resolve them. So how does authorization work across the three? So whenever an AWS principal, which is a user, a group, or a role, issues a request to S3, the authorization decision depends on the union of all the IAM policies, S3 bucket policies, and S3 ACLs that apply. So let's start with least privilege. What is least privilege? Well, with least privilege, decisions always default to deny. So think about when you set up an S3 bucket, it is always private by default. That S3 bucket denies anonymous access by default to everyone, and it basically only allows access to the AWS account in which it was created. And by default, actually, when you go in and create a user, if that user was to log into the AWS console without any policies assigned to that user account, or if they weren't a part of any group with the policies assigned, they won't be able to read that S3 bucket. So there's always least privilege. You're always going to be denied by default. Also with least privilege, an explicit deny always trumps an allow. So if something is specifically denied, if you specifically deny an object or you specifically deny a bucket, that is always going to trump an allow. So just remember that as well. It always overrides the allow. Moving on, if we have an IAM policy which grants access to an object, the S3 bucket denies policy to that object and there's no S3 ACL, then of course access is going to be denied. Similarly, if no method specifies an allow, then the request will be denied by default. So remember, an S3 bucket is always, private, like I said, unless you go in and specifically allow something, access to that bucket or access to an object within that bucket. No one else is going to be allowed to access it. Only if no methods specify a deny and one or more methods specify an allow, then the request will be allowed. And the best way to visualize it is this. So you're always going to start at a deny. Your decision's always going to be a deny. Then you have to go through and evaluate all the applicable policies. And there's going to be at least 2, sometimes there'll be 3 in your exam. And what you have to figure out is there an explicit deny? Is there a deny on this bucket? Is there a deny on this object? Or is there a deny on this user being able to access S3? If there's an explicit deny, that's it. It's deny. If there's no explicit deny, move on to step 4. Can you see an allow? Is there a specific allow to allow the user to access this bucket or to access this object or to access S3 entirely? If there is an allow, then it's going to be an allow. If there's neither a deny or an allow, then it's going to be a deny. So basically, you're always looking for a deny first. If there's no deny, is there an allow? If there's no allow, it's going to be a deny. Literally, if you memorize this diagram going into the exam and you go through and practice this on some JSON, you're absolutely going to kill this part of the exam. So let's just quickly review what you need to understand. So with least privilege, decisions always default to deny. Also, an explicit deny always trumps an allow. If no method specifies an allow, then the request will be denied by default. And only if no method specifies a deny and one or more methods specify an allow, then the request will be allowed. So like I said, go into the exam understanding this 5-step process. Remember that everything starts with a deny. Look at all the different policies. Is there an explicit deny? Then yes, stop there. It's going to be denied. If there's no explicit deny, is there an explicit allow? If yes, then it's going to be allowed. If there's neither a deny or an allow, you're going back to deny. So if you just want to do this mathematically, 2 out of 3 times is pretty much going to be denied. Really what you're looking for is if there's no explicit deny and there is an explicit allow, then you will be allowed to access that object or bucket or that resource within S3. So hopefully that all makes sense, and that is really honestly worth a big part of your exam. So that is it for this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.